Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple. 22 years, 7 FA Cups, 3 league titles and an unbeaten season, and being the club's longest serving manager. That's what Unai Emery had to replace when he walked through the Arsenal doors. And although he's had his fair share of bumps ever since he's taken over, Arsenal fans should be optimistic, as Emery has been quietly improving Arsenal. But how has he achieved this? In this video we take a look at Emery's silent evolution. But just quickly, if you're new around here and want to see more football videos, go ahead and hit subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, a like would be great. Feel free to drop video suggestions below as well. Now, let's get into it. If you want more news stories and score updates on Emery's Arsenal and so much more, you can get them through today's video sponsor, OneFootball, which is the football app to keep you up to date. When assessing this transition, we'll look at Wenger's last couple of seasons at the club, Emery's preferred tactics at PSG and beyond, and what exactly he's changed at Arsenal since coming in. After close to 9 years without a major trophy, during which the highlight was a Champions League final appearance, the final 5 years of Wenger's Arsenal career were comparatively successful, winning 3 FA Cups during that period. But still, Wenger often came under pressure due to his tactical choices, often viewed as inflexible, going through long stretches of using the same formation despite poor results, predictable and often uninspiring substitutions, as well as the largely unstructured style of play, with attack being the emphasis, meant that they would often come unstuck against organised teams. For a long time they struggled defensively, using a 4-2-3-1. The back two pairing would often be Koscielny and Mertesacker, both accomplished defenders in their own right. However, Koscielny is a very proactive defender and would often leave the defensive lines to confront attackers. When it worked, he stopped the opposition in their tracks. However, when bypassed, it left a gap in defense and a slow Mertesacker was often isolated against the attackers. But after pressure became intense, Wenger for the first time in a while pivoted his strategy during the latter half of 16-17, where he shifted to a 3-4-3 to allow Ozil and Sanchez to both flourish in the 10 positions, whilst liberating Bellerin and Kolasinac, who were both better going forward than defensively. But the main logic of this was that more centre-backs meant increased protection for the team when any defenders wandered. And for a while this seemed to work, as Arsenal won the FA Cup beating City and Chelsea on their way. But when asked why he had switched to a back three, Wenger said, just to have something new to believe in helps him to focus, and overall the fact that we conceded 3 at West Brom and 3 at Crystal Palace, I felt it was needed. This implied that the formation wasn't a well thought out strategy, but rather a last ditch attempt to prove adaptability, all of which wasn't helped by the fact that he only used the formation after seeing Conte's success with it. This became evident when he didn't buy an additional ball-playing centre-back, despite stating that he'll stick with the formation into the next season. In addition, he often used a double pivot of Xhaka and Ramsey, both of who are more comfortable on the ball than defending, again indicating a lack of preparation. These were long-standing problems, evidenced by the fact that in his last 3 seasons, only 28% of the budget had gone towards defensive players. In fact, with the back 3, Arsenal actually had a lower expected goals per 90, as well as a higher expected goals against per 90 than with the back 4. When he finally left, there was a massive hole to be filled, as Arsenal had witnessed the difficulty of replacing a legacy manager when Ferguson left United. There were a lot of rumours on who would be the man to replace him, and for ages it seemed like Arteta was nailed on. So it was a surprise when Emery was the chosen man, to a decidedly mixed reaction from the fans. He had previously guided Sevilla to a hat-trick of Europa League titles before moving to Paris, where he enjoyed a mixed spell. Let's take a quick look at his PSG tactics so we know why Arsenal were looking to select him to replace Wenger. At PSG, Emery won 7 major honours. However, in his first season he did lose out on the league to a freak Monaco side. Winning the league was the minimum requirement, and it was in Europe where he would primarily be assessed. And much like both of his predecessors, he was knocked out relatively early, first to City and then Real Madrid, for which he came under heavy scrutiny. Emery had been a 4-2-3-1 man most of his career, but at PSG he pivoted to a 4-3-3 after a brief and unsuccessful spell with the former, partly due to complaints from the players. This player power is something that he had to wrestle with constantly at the club, for example when Neymar and Cavani argued over a penalty. When he did use a 4-3-3, it often shifted in attack, as Cavani would drop, allowing Neymar and Mbappe centrally ahead of him, or Neymar would drift into the 10 behind the two forwards. By using two wide players who naturally drifted inwards, it meant highly attacking fullbacks in Munier, Alves, Kazawa and Bernat provided the width and high crossing numbers. As a result, especially against bigger teams, they'd be vulnerable in the wide areas when defending, especially as the front three would almost never assist in the defensive phase. In addition, his midfield three often consisted of Rabiot, Verratti and Thiago Motta, all great players, however all preferred to play in a deep position, meaning that once Matuidi left the club, in the Champions League, where they would actually go through spells without the ball, the front three would become isolated as there was no one to carry the ball forwards. Despite the flaws sprinkled amongst the victories, PSG was still reluctant to let him go. When Emery was brought in, he represented a stark contrast to Wenger, but simultaneously there were some through lines between the two. Unlike Arteta, he had a vast range of top-level experience to help ease the transition into a new era. Another thing that made him an attractive prospect was that he had done well with limited funds at Sevilla, a situation that he'd have to face at Arsenal. In 2018, Arsenal also employed Raul Sanllehi as sporting director, and previously Emery had enjoyed success working successfully with Monchi at Sevilla. Indeed, unlike Wenger, Emery was a coach first, focusing most of his energy on improving the on-the-pitch performance. This included detailed video sessions analysing the opposition that could last over an hour. This indicated that when he prepared, he focused on nullifying the opponent's strength, whereas Wenger trusted that his team would be good enough to win without adjusting their tactics no matter who they faced. But to adjust to the new era, he would need reinforcements. Unlike Wenger, his first focus was on defensive-minded players, bringing in Lichtsteiner, Leno, Socrates, Torreira and Guendouzi. When assessing the tactical evolution, it's fair to split it into roughly two eras, the first being the 4-2-3-1 first phase. He defaulted to his favourite formation in this situation. One of the biggest on-the-ball changes was concerted playing out from the back. This was initially a problem as Cech, Mustafi and Socrates were not the best on the ball, and this opened up space for the more capable Holding. However, he was soon injured. So the problem arose when teams would mercilessly press Cech, and if his nearby options were taken, he didn't have the range to find his men. Emery would counter this by moving Xhaka deep. Here, we have a contrast with Wenger, who often used a double pivot of Xhaka and Ramsey would drift forward, leaving a gap in the midfield during this phase. Instead, Emery used Torreira, who would still be sure to shield the midfield during this phase. Under Wenger, if Ramsey had moved forward, there would be limited ball progression, but Emery also had the option of playing Guendouzi, who could take over during the second phase of build-up whilst Xhaka was deep. To start off with, he'd use Iwobi, Ozil and Mkhitaryan, all of whom drifted centrally, so the width had to be provided by highly offensive fullbacks in Bellerin and Kolasinac, similar to his PSG side. But unlike at PSG, he had less possession, so these gaps were exposed more often. But one advantage it did give was that when the ball went wide, he could easily overload the box to try and get on the end of crosses, which is a tactic that he used often, as shown by the fullbacks averaging the most open play crosses for the team. Defensively, he brought in a high pressing system, and you can see an example of this in the match breakdown against Napoli, which is linked in the cards now. But essentially, from this position with so many men committed forward, he would push the defense high and try to press the opposition into a mistake. Very effective when it worked, but often the opposition could exploit this space behind the defense. Emery wasn't pleased with the progress. Structure is a word often associated with Emery, and he looked to instill this further. This can be seen in Ozil and Ramsey, two great players who are happy being floaters and not tied to a position. As a result, their stats decreased as the season went on. So, Emery shifted to a back three, using a 3-4-3 or 3-4-2-1 as the season went on. It could be argued that unlike when Wenger switched to a back three, Emery did it with explicit intentions. By using a back three with a left back at centre back, he covered the gaps left by Kolasinac, who effectively played as a winger, as shown by Arsenal using the left hand side for 42% of their attacks. With Bellerin now injured, they were using a makeshift right back, so any extra cover could be useful. And to top it all off, Leno was now the goalkeeper. This meant that they had an easy numerical advantage when pressed during the build-up phase, so this meant it was easy to play out and Xhaka could remain in the midfield in the second phase of build-up, as Monreal was more comfortable on the ball to perform the first phase. With Xhaka now in the second phase, Torreira started even more regularly to give the midfield cover, although this did reduce Guendouzi's starts. Wingers have historically been a big part of Emery's plans, but at Arsenal he didn't have any pure wingers. In the 4-2-3-1, when the wingers did drift central, yes, the fullbacks could overlap, but this would leave gaps. But now, with the back three, they could commit higher up the pitch, acting as auxiliary wingers with less worry about the defensive elements, as the inside forwards would often draw the opposition fullback's attention, giving Kolasinac more space on the wing. Or alternatively, when Ozil or Ramsey were on the pitch, they would drift into the 10 role with Aubameyang joining Lacazette, again making it easy for a central overload. Again, the high volume of numbers allowed a counter-press, and with Leno now in the team, he functioned as a sweeper keeper in emergencies, reducing the space behind the line. Defensively, this did work, as they conceded 1.43 xG per 90 with the back 3 compared to 1.54 with the back 4, although this did negatively affect the attack. All of this led to a 5th placed finish, as well as a Europa League final appearance. So does this mean that Emery has been the perfect replacement? Well, statistically, he's done worse than Wenger in many regards, such as goals scored, the expected goals metrics, shot averages and more. However, that was using a squad that he hadn't had the time to have maximum impact on as of yet. There were several encouraging signs in 18-19 suggesting that with Emery, it may be less of a revolution, but more of an evolution. But how would you assess his time at the club? Let us know in the comments below. But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.